Hi, welcome to Plan Early, Pay Less. My name is Jacob Taggart. I'm a finance student at Texas State University and a summer intern here at Quotient Wealth Partners. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, John Morris.
Hi there. My name is John Morris. I'm a graduate student at Texas Tech studying personal financial planning. I'm also an alumni of the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, where I studied accounting and finance. And just like Jacob here, my co-host, I am a rotational intern here at Quotient Wealth Partners. So I have a question that I think a lot of people can resonate with. Just kind of painting a picture. Whenever we were 17, 18 years old, and we were going off to college for the very first time, taking that long drive, we probably had a lot of questions going on in our head. You know, how many friends am I going to make? Who am I going to live with? Am I going to survive communal bathrooms? A lot of things like that. But one question that I think not a lot of people raise in that sort of time frame is, does my family have a plan? Not a good luck, not a wish, an actual well thought out plan. If you are thinking about that right now, I just want to say that you're in a really good place, because today we are going to be talking about planning for college, all the sorts of costs associated with that, and overall gaining that peace of mind in order to prepare for college. So Jacob, I just kind of want to invite you to talk a little bit about your college experience, not necessarily what your classes were and all that, but what was kind of the setup as far as what your family had in store, what did they have stored away financially, and how much did they kind of keep you in the know of how they were going to pay for your college?
Yeah, that's a really great question, John. I think for me personally, growing up, that was never really a conversation that I had with either of my parents directly. And as I went throughout high school, I had gotten some dual credits under my belt and was headed in the college direction. But like I said, largely I was kind of left in the dark as far as what the plan was. Fortunately, both my grandparents had funds set aside to be able to support me as far as tuition and living costs are concerned. So I'm very blessed in that aspect. But even my grandparents' approach, I was kind of left in the dark, and they say hindsight's always 20/20, and looking back, I really do think that was a good thing, just because I think I definitely tried a little bit harder as far as scholarships are concerned, and just from a student perspective, it definitely changed the way I looked at things. So John, I know I've gotten to share my experience, and I want to flip the question to you now. What did that conversation look like in your household? What planning measures did your parents take and your family undergo, and just curious what your experience was like in that regard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Jacob. And I just want to say that I relate a lot to kind of what your story was, in that there wasn't a whole lot of, proper planning when it came to when I wanted to go to college, when I made the decision to go to UT Knoxville. And that's no discredit to my parents, because, they were very fortunate, very blessed when it came to having enough money to settle those sorts of payments. But at the same time, there wasn't any further discussions when it came to, did we have enough money? Did we have enough to where I can maybe buy some more discretionary things if I wanted to decorate my dorm or my apartment, or, I wanted to, buy something else a little bit more frivolous, I never really was able to facilitate that conversation. And while I am absolutely grateful that, I was able to afford certain things, I just wanted to be more in the know. And I didn't want to mean that as a discredit, So it's a very tricky conversation to have whenever you are the beneficiary and there isn't a proper plan in place. But still, knowing what I know now when it comes to proper ways to save for college, I think it is very interesting just kind of looking back on that and incorporating what I know now about 529s, about ESAs, UTMAs, all sorts of different vehicles. So I would definitely be using sort of the lack of knowledge that was given upon me, and I think now I'm confident in kind of flipping that around. So that way, if ever I want to have a family, I'm going to know kind of what's the sort of time frame, roughly 17, 18 years to, put those sorts of systems in place. So, and I think that you've shared with me earlier how you kind of share those sort of similar beliefs in that, now that we know better, I think it would be a tremendous payoff to our parents to just show what we know and show how we have learned from the things that they weren't able to implement the way that we are hopefully going to be able to whenever we get to that age. So I think that's a really good thing, to keep in mind, to propel in motion as we kind of navigate our careers and, of course, our personal lives.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, John. And I think a lot of people probably watching share a similar experience as far as the maybe lack of planning that their families took as well. And so, to your point, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Hopefully that lack of knowledge that we experienced growing up will correlate to some intentionality one day when that time does come with those conversations that we have with our children. And so transitioning over to our special guest that we have planned, Brian Weatherly, a advisor here at Quotient Wealth Partners. We're excited to welcome him in and get some of his expertise and insight into this topic.
Yeah, Brian is a great person to talk to in this regard. He is a CU Denver alum. We're talking about college here, so I figured I'd bring up the alma mater. He got his start in private equity and hedge funds and has kind of navigated his way into wealth management. And now he has 2 young children of his own. So considering college savings plans and all the things associated with that, it's definitely a very relevant topic for him. So we're very happy to have him on this podcast. We're going to be picking his brain a little bit about kind of what his insights are, not only from his professional life, but also his personal life. So we're just so happy to have Brian here, like I said. So the first question that I wanted to get your insights on were just one of the biggest things that people anticipate when it comes to planning for college is just the sheer fact that all sorts of costs associated with college are going to increase year over year.
Right.
Whenever it comes to tuition, books, rent for an apartment, inevitably, everything seems to go up year over year. So I was just curious as to what are your insights on this phenomenon, and how do you reassure clients that there are ways to work around these cost escalations within a college savings plan?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question because I do get that a lot from clients. And especially, cost of college is actually higher than inflation right now.
Sure.
It's probably closer to 7 to 8%. Some colleges, it's all the way up to 15%. So when we're evaluating from just how do we save for that, there's multiple different vehicles that we can utilize. Of course, the one that we always hear about is a 529 plan. And utilizing an account for a child is typically the best way to do it because we can invest it. We can put it in a very aggressive portfolio, especially when they're young, get some good growth out of it, and then really combat some of those costs.
So, Brian, as we know, there are a lot of options when it comes to college savings plans. We know about the 529s. You touched on that earlier. There's also covered LESAs. There's sorts of tips and tricks around a Roth IRA, irrevocable trusts, and there's a myriad of other different options. So when a client is curious about scheduling some sort of college savings plan, what is your thought process when it comes to sort of the filtration system? What works and what doesn't work for our clients? How do you decide what you think is the best option for a college savings plan?
Yeah, so that's a good question because, as you can imagine, when we're looking at savings options for children, there are a lot. There's the 529 covered all. One that I actually utilize a lot too is a brokerage account or just a taxable joint brokerage account. Because what winds up happening, let's say we're putting into a 529 plan, you can get too much money in there. And yes, there are new tax law changes that just occurred that allow us to take some of that money and put it into a Roth IRA, just as long as we have had the account for 15 years. That is one way to combat that. But on the other hand, you want to have that flexibility, right? So let's just say your kid gets scholarships. If they get a scholarship, you kind of get stuck, or that money gets stuck in a 529 plan, right? So that's why I like to combine those two, is a brokerage account and then a college savings account. And for estate planning, if you have a very wealthy client, they're great because you can do 5 years of contributions at one time into a 529 plan. And you can kind of use it as like I'd say a family type of a fund, put 300, 500 grand in there. And now you can always change the beneficiary, right? So let's say the first kid goes through school, change the beneficiary, go back to the next kid, and so on and so forth, down to the grandkids. And then now you're creating basically an education legacy trust type of a fund for children. So I always look at it like there are a lot of different options, right? And if you're in a state that has a state income tax, there could be the possibility that you could get a state income tax deduction if you put into a 529 plan. Here in Texas, we don't have a state income tax, but still a great way to save. But combining multiple ones is typically the best. Another option, if your client is like self-employed, you could hire your child, and then you can do actual custodial contributions into a Roth IRA for them. Let's say they make $5,000, you can put $5,000 into a Roth IRA, and you can pull that out tax-free for higher education funding. And then if they do get a scholarship in that point, the great part is now they have a big jump as far as retirement planning goes. So, it is based on the client from a situation perspective and what they're trying to do. But from tax planning, 529 is great, and just utilizing multiple different accounts is typically the best.
Yeah, definitely. And, you made a really good point when it comes to the flexibility in investing in taxable or non-taxable, tax-deferred college savings plans, because at the end of the day, it is going to be the child's decision as to whether they want to go to college and utilize those funds. So when it comes to investing in multiple different accounts that have and serve different functions while also containing that compatibility to be used for educational expenses, I think that's a really good method as far as setting up those children for their future endeavors.
Yeah, and also combining them allows you the flexibility. Let's say, they do get a scholarship. Now you can say, all right, hey, we're going to earmark this for your wedding, or hey, your first house. So that's why I utilize both of them, just because you have that optionality. And then you can really kind of help out your kids in the ways that they need, not just for schooling. But the 529, because there have been changes to it, it is a lot more user-friendly now than it was, say, 5 years ago, right? You could only use it for college. Now you can use it for private schooling. So what I've seen, or I've had clients do, is grandparents will gift into it, put $75,000, $100,000, and then when the kid's born, now you have basically you can pay for their private schooling while they're prior to college. Even you can pay for grad school with it now. You can pay for certificates with it. If you want to be a CPA or even a CFP, you can pay for those kinds of programs. And even if they kind of go a little bit of a different route and want like a technical school, whether it's an electrician or HVAC, you can actually use a 529 now for those schools as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like we touched on earlier, that flexibility just opens up so many different pathways for those children before, they start to really formulate what their life goals, what their next huge steps are going to be within different chapters of their lives. So, yeah, I think it's really important to make people aware of those things rather than just putting the money in that vehicle, setting it and forgetting it, and letting those children figure it out for themselves.
Right.
The comfortability of those options, I think, goes a long way when it comes to setting up for not just college, but for really any chapter of their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why combining is typically the best way to do it. That's just the flexibility piece that I personally use all the time.
Yeah. Well, all right. We really appreciate that, Brian. We're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. Jacob is going to be coming in now, and he has a few more questions pertaining to not just your professional sort of endeavors, but also your personal life, because you also have a couple of young children now. So I'm sure that you have made a lot of decisions on their behalf as far as setting them up.
So, Brian, moving on from some of the technicals that you and John discussed recently, more into your own personal journey. What did that look like for you going into college? And kind of what steps did or didn't your parents maybe take, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was fortunate enough that my parents did help me with college. One thing that when I did go to college, they said is, hey, we're going to take some loans out. Great part about a 529 plan or some of these other vehicles, you're able to pay off loans with them as well. So they said, hey, we're going to put some burden on you just in case. So they paid for a good portion of it, and then they wound up paying off my loans when I did graduate. I was very fortunate for that. But as far as kind of setting myself up, I did a lot of the kind of groundwork myself, right? I grew up in Colorado, kind of in the country, and I actually did 4-H, where you show animals. It was a great experience. I think that higher education is definitely something that a lot of people, especially these days, kind of don't really think about, especially before you have kids. But there are ways you can start kind of preparing yourself, for kids too. So, but yeah, that's really kind of how my path went.
Absolutely, yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question. To my understanding, you've got 2 little ones at home, and have started that season of life. What has planning and prepping both prior to having children and now that you've got 2 little ones at home, what does that look like for you and your wife, and how have y'all kind of navigated? What steps did y'all take prior and now?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of funny, but there's as far as when I found out my wife was actually pregnant, I opened a 529 plan under my own name, and then we started funding it before my daughter was even born, and then changed the beneficiary to her name when she was born, and they actually give you a social security number. By the way, that takes a while. It's not very quick. And I did the same thing for my son. And the reason that I did that is you don't have to put a whole heck of a lot of money into these things, right? Because you start that early, a couple $100 a month, you're going to have a very, very large 529 plan. So I started with the 529 plans. I say once they get around, 150, 200,000, I'll stop, and then I'll start putting into a brokerage account for each one of them, because the flexibility piece is definitely what I want to have for my kids. Like I said, I have a son and a daughter, so I know I'm going to have to pay for a wedding. And if she's anything like her mother, it's not going to be cheap. So
that's all right, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to make sure that they have the optionality, right? And then, of course, putting into a brokerage account right now, kind of earmarked for the kids for, their cars, because they're definitely going to need cars. Cost is not going down on those. We're still kicking around the idea of private school. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that we started as early as we did, because now that we can use those for private school, that's kind of a leg up. And then my mother and my father, they both put into, actually we have like a 529 plan that they put into for the kids, which is another great planning tool, because everybody now has to fill out the FAFSA when we go into college, but it doesn't affect some of the income limitations, because that 529 plan is owned by the grandparents, not you. So that's another planning tool that we, came to utilize, especially in my family. And then, like we have another one that for birthdays that we put, instead of, my kids have too many toys anyway. So instead of just getting a bunch of toys, I'm like, hey, put into a 529 plan. And the great thing these days with technology, you can actually just text QR codes to people, and they can go in there and contribute and, put a little message in there. But that's really kind of how we tackled it.
Yeah, so Brian, one question I have for you is kind of, what does that conversation look like between both you and your wife but also your children. What does the education look like, and are these conversations that you're having with your children as well?
Yeah, and I mean, having a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old. I mean, 6-month-old doesn't really listen that well, so neither does a 4-year-old. So, but yeah, we've definitely started some of those conversations, and I always say one of the great things that you can do with kids too is there's actually a couple different apps out there in the marketplace that'll allow you to do, like, they can do a chore or something around the house, and you can say, hey, your toys are made, wherever, or your shoes, they're made by Nike. You can actually put into an account and they can buy shares of Nike. So there's really cool tools like that you can utilize to kind of incentivize them from a overall helping themselves out, building a savings account. I always say the education piece, I mean, those are conversations that you start having, Of course, my wife and I are talking about, do we do private school right now? Do we do charter school, public school? Because there's a lot of, especially in Dallas, there's a lot of different options, and it's kind of hard to weigh, right? Depending on where you are, those are definitely conversations you're going to have with your kids. But we'll instill that education is a very, very important piece. Not necessarily if they don't want to go to college, they don't have to go to college, right? If they want to do a technical school, that's fine. But again, education is definitely going to be number one in there from a priority perspective. But I don't want them to be like so focused on it that they can't be kids, right? So I think it's just that happy medium and that balance and having those conversations just so they kind of understand, all right, yes, I do want to do good in school. I don't want to slack off, right? And maybe they don't get a full ride. That's okay, right? So I think it's just a conversation that typically you're probably, when they're 8, 10 years old, that's going to come up a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in this new season of life for you, becoming a father, how has that shifted your perspective whenever sitting across the table from a client? And how has that changed kind of those conversations and planning?
Yeah, so it's I'd say it's changed it pretty drastically because when you first start out as an advisor, you don't have kids, you don't have a family, and you're trying to relate to individuals, right? It makes it a little bit easier to have those conversations because you're like, oh, I know exactly what your daughter was like. I have one myself. But I would say it just helps from a standpoint of you can kind of understand what they're going through and what they're trying to achieve. And even, clients that have grandkids now, now that, my parents are grandparents, I would say it's just changed the conversation to more of a kind of family oriented compared to just like from a planning perspective, right? So it's a little bit different, but still, I mean, when you first start out in the industry, that's always going to be a focus. And when you're meeting with people, there's going to be I would say a lot of different feelings as far as education goes and planning for it. I have some clients that are like, kids can pay for it themselves if they want to go. And then I have other clients that do exactly like we did, right? Start 529s early, or the grandparents start 529s. So it's definitely changed a little bit, but I would say it's still top of mind every time you're having a conversation, especially first, second meeting when you're doing a lot of discovery. I would say, I mean, I guess you can relate. I would really say that's kind of the biggest difference now.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one question I have for you, Brian, if there was one piece of advice or education that you could pass on to your children in regards to early planning, what would that look like? What would that be?
Save as much as you can, and always take advantage of your employer benefits because, I would say things have shifted a little bit to where, kids are more concerned about income they're going to make instead of the benefits that are offered by some of these companies, right? Like Fidelity has fantastic benefits. So make sure you're saving, right? Because you never know what's going to happen in life. You never know what's going to come up. And if you can start early, the earlier you start, the better off you are. So, that's why I like the apps out there that, when they do a chore, they can actually, instead of just handing them $10, you can actually invest it, and they can see their money grow. So, I just want them to really understand, like, you do need to save because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on to speak with us and have some good conversations on planning early and what that looks like, getting ready for college. Brian, how can people connect with you that are watching if they're maybe looking to get connected?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go, they can always email me, or you can go on quotientwealth.com. And I'm on the website, and you can reach out to me there. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on here. It was great talking to you guys, and hope you guys got some value out of it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Brian.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you. Man, John, what a treat it was to have Brian come in and share a little bit of his expertise with us in regard to taking those next steps and planning for college. I think we've got a lot of key takeaways. I mean, what was something that you enjoyed discussing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Brian was able to share was, there used to be sort of an idea that certain college savings plans could only be used for college, and you had to go to a 4-year public or private institution in order to fully utilize those funds. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. There is so much more flexibility when it comes to if you want to go to a vocational school, if you want to go to the trades, if you want to use it for grad school, if you want to use it for not only just 4-year institution, but also, all the things that are outside of what you normally think about, your tuition, your books, and those other things. So there's a lot more degrees of freedom when it comes to if you want to open up a college savings fund. And that just makes the child's decisions much less of a burden. Maybe they don't want to go to college. Maybe they don't want to go to the same alma mater that their parents did. You never know just what the situation may entail. So, opening up something like a 529, something like, using a Roth IRA, or even converting a 529 to a Roth IRA, because we can do that now. So yeah, there's just so many options for children, and it's not necessarily, you have to go one sort of path. So I think that is so huge. And, being able to communicate that, parent to child or planner to family, just the more degrees of communication that opens up. I think there's a lot of opportunity that can come about with that.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I think, one of those pieces too that Brian touched on whenever he was talking about his own children and talking about his daughter and how one day she's going to have a wedding, and we can only imagine how expensive those can get. But having that, just like he said, having that optionality to be able to shift those funds into other seasons of life, beyond education, beyond college, a private school as well, K through 12 education, and being able to utilize those funds in different areas. I think it's certainly something that for those of you that are watching, your kids will thank you for later on. I think, one thing for me in particular, listening to Brian share kind of his background and growing up and what that conversation looked like in his own household. I was also in 4-H growing up and showed animals, and I thought it was really cool how he that's how he got his start was in saving for college was through 4-H. And it definitely speaks to Brian's his brain is definitely finance focused and finance centered. So I thought that was kind of cool, and that he shared that piece with us.
Yeah, and I myself, coming from a very agricultural background, it definitely touched a very close spot for me when it comes to just kind of humanizing that. I did some stuff like that growing up. And my brother is obviously very well in tune with agriculture. So I thought that was really cool, just kind of that sort of relatability. yeah, it's just great to hear from someone that's not only been around these sorts of systems and have made these recommendations throughout their career, but now he's really putting that into practice with his own children, like you said. So it really hits close to home. But yeah, it just shows, this is so translatable. This is so approachable for all sorts of different clients from all sorts of different situations. So to kind of wrap that up, if you are curious and would like any more information, any more resources when it comes to college savings, we encourage you to go to quotientwealthpartners.com and you can sign up for a free consultation. It's of no additional charge, but it'll definitely put you on the right path as far as learning about all the sorts of different systems involved with college savings.
Yeah, we want to thank you guys for listening to the first episode of Plan Early, Pay Less. John, thanks for a great episode, and
thank you too, Jacob.
Appreciate the conversation.